we talk about the stories and the argument and things like that. You'll bear with me. We'll do the best we can. As I mentioned, I'm the world's worst speech maker. And I'm hoping that as soon as I stop, which will be in about 1 minute, some of you will have some questions to ask. I'll try to answer them. Because if you don't have any questions to ask, we might as well start getting our coats right now, because my speech is just about over. I've been doing these comics for a lot of years, I guess about 25 of them. And I write them, and I'm the editor. And these past 5 years, we've had some great success with our books, mostly due to guys like you, because they put on with the colleges and with the servicemen. And when I say they, I mean specifically the Marvel things. For some reason that doesn't really escape me, our editors aren't doing too well as far as the more intelligent audience is concerned. It's a miracle to me how we are, but so each year we seem to do a little better, and our age group, the readers, the age of our readers seems to mount. We'll be getting people a little closer. It keeps up. Just in a nutshell, I will say that because people very often say, "What's our secret?" I don't know what they mean by that, but if they mean what I hope they mean, I think our secret is that we just try to tell good stories, try to make the artwork as good as possible. And we hope that if we get a kick out of the stories, we don't think that we're that unusual or that stupid, so we'd like to feel that other unusual people who aren't just stupid will also enjoy the stories. And it's been very nice being here today. And I think that about wraps it up, so we'll now have a question session. Sir.
Mr. Lee, have you given any thoughts to giving Dr. Strange a mag of his own? Because he's one of the most popular guys this room here. And you just feel that he doesn't get enough space.
Actually, we give... Do these people look hostile? We'd love to give everybody a magazine of his own, including Doc Strange. We get requests for these things all the time, and we mention in the books, and I'm sure nobody believes it, but we just don't have the time and we don't have the staff. Now, we've just lost the artist who does Doc Strange, Steve Ditko, who also does Spider. And I feel as badly about it as you do. He's a very peculiar guy. He's a great talent, and but he's a little eccentric. Anyway, I haven't spoken to this guy for over a year. He mails in the work, and I write the stories, and that's the way he liked to work. And one day he just phoned and he said, "I'm in." So that was it. So this is the acid test now, because he was such a popular artist. I think that we've managed to find people to replace him, where those boos will change to a chorus of cheers. But I know how it is, because you get sentimental about an artist, especially one as good as he, and I feel the same way. But at any rate, we're so tight and we're so limited with men that if we lose one artist, it's a major crisis. So when you say, are we going to give somebody else his own book, we can just barely get 10 pages of Dr. Strange out each month. Naturally, to give him his own book would be 20 pages. And that may not sound like much, but those extra 10 pages a month, we just don't have the artist to do it, and I don't have the time to write. In fact, I've started a new guy on the stories, a fellow named Dennis O'Neill, who's writing Dr. Strange, and I hope he's going to do it.
There's a sort of a strange religious hierarchy. And something's been bothering me for a while, and that is, if Odin is the lord of the universe, how does he tolerate the existence of Zeus? Now, Thor recognizes what an Olympian contract is immediately, yet he had only just been to Olympus in a special a little while ago. I've never seen him before. But, how can you have these two gods ruling the universe at the same time?
Sometimes these question and answer periods go on too long. I was kind of hoping you wouldn't answer that. Actually, as you may have gathered if you've been reading our books, we take a liberty now. What happened was, we started out with Norse gods because we thought they hadn't been used too much. much. And then we're idiots. We try to please the public. We got a million letters. Hey, why don't you use the Roman gods? Why don't you use the Greek gods? And it occurred to us, you know, we figure there's probably one heaven. But then we said, why does there have to be one heaven? I mean, we make the rules. I kind of think of it now as a few condominiums that are next door to each other. You see, and Owen's the landlord of this condominium. They don't interfere with each other. In fact, we figure it might be a good story for some poor annual in the future to have a war between Owen and Susan, and maybe George. It is, if you take it literally, you get very worried because you realize that they're all the same person. It just depends on which mythology you're referring to. Fortunately, Jack Kirby is as confused about it as I am, so we don't have too much trouble agreeing on these things because neither of us understand them. But actually, we figure that the reader will eventually accept the fact that here's a little heaven here ruled over by Odin, and then somewhere on Mount Olympus is another. In fact, I hope you stop thinking of them as heaven after a while, and they're just like celestial empires. You see, I mean, there's not just America, there's England, you got Mexico. You got Asgard, and you got Olympus, and I'll hope there's another question for you. Yes,
I don't know if that's somebody's letter she gets. I can't believe that anyone actually writing this. You know, I can't believe that anyone made these up.
Exactly what context you're saying that in, but well, they're written. Now, I must admit,
I really get people really write these letters in.
David, hundreds. I think we get more letters than the Beatles. I don't know if that's good or bad. We get more. And the one liberty that we do take is I add the letters. I must admit, I don't have time to read each and every one because so many of them are the same. You kids are just right. We love you, man. Please keep it. Yes. The girl in my office reads them, and any that really say something, either a knock or a boost or anything that might help us, she gives me to read. I take them home. Usually the letters are too long. They do not make them. In fact, we're very lucky. Almost everything we put out sells. One day I'd like to put out a book just with the letters we get. That would be the most amusing thing. Fantastic letters. Sir?
What's the thing again about that Pfeiffer?
It's a funny thing. Nobody knows about us except the people who read comics today. Now, Pfeiffer does not read comics today. You see, Pfeiffer is like I would be if I weren't in the business. I probably wouldn't read them either. He's a contemporary of mine, and he remembers what was going on years ago. Years ago, the strips that he mentions in his book were the big strips. He mentioned Captain America, he mentioned Human Torch here and there. I didn't read the book, I thumbed through it. But there's really no reason for him to mention us today because he doesn't know about us. And it's just like we have people now working on television shows of our strips. When they go to a sponsor or to the network, they'll say, we're representing Marvel Comics, we have a pilot film, or whatever it is that people in those fields say. And the sponsor of the network are very apt to say, well, what's Marvel Comics? We're so in that we haven't reached the general public yet. And in this field, Pfeiffer is the general public, because he's newspaper-oriented today. He has nothing to do with comic magazines.
How big are your sales? How wide is your sales?
I'll give you an example. About 5 years ago, we were selling about 13 million a year, and today we're selling about 45 million a year, which is incredible. And the sales have just been going like this if they were on a graph, just without a stop. Now, it used to be that for the whole publishing business, especially comics, the summer are your best sales months, and in the winter everything dies. This has never happened before. In the winter, we sell the same as in the summer. Apparently, if somebody likes our books, they don't want to stop reading them because the snow is falling or whatever. So the sales are pretty good. National sells more than we do today, but they put out more. We sell a higher percentage. In other words, of the books that we put out, we may sell 60 or 70%. Of the books they put out, they may sell 40 or 50%. But they put out so many more that if somebody compares a total figure, they say, gee, National is outselling. But as far as I know, we're percentage-wise, which I think is where you can really tell we're doing well.
So Ray, how did you get started?
Well, I have to choose my words carefully because I'll tell you a little story. Somebody asked me that, some fellow who was writing an interview for Radio TV Daily. He did his best, but when the thing was written, it came out wrong. What I told him was that I started when I was 17. I was just out of high school a while, and I had been doing a lot of little things, writing and that. And I heard that they needed a writer over at Marvel, which had another name there. I think it was called Timely Comics, without remember. And there were only two people on staff, Joe Simon and Jack Kirby, who I had worked for years ago. Jack did the artwork, and Joe, for the most part, took the credit for it. Joe was the editor, and Jack was the artist, and they were a team. They were both terribly talented. But at any rate, I submitted a few freelance stories, and they bought them and seemed to like them. And then they wanted somebody on staff to help them. And I was young enough, I guess, to get cheaply, so they hired me. And I wrote some stories, and I delivered bunches, and kept the place neat and clean. And then for some reason, Joe and Jack left, and I was the only other guy there. And publisher Goodman said to me, obviously you're too young to hold down the job of editor, but do you think you can just pitch in until I get somebody else? I'm sure I'll do my best. Well, that was 25 years ago. He's never really told me that it's permanent. So I'm still looking, you see. Now, I thought this is true, but I thought it was kind of an amusing way to say it, and I told it to this fellow, and when the story came out in Radio TV Daily, it said, parenthetically, after the factual part of the story, the books, he said, and Stan Lee, the editor, was hired 25 years ago, and Mr. Goodman is now looking for a new editor. So, you kind of have to watch how things are quoted. But that's the whole side of the story. Yes?
Talking again about mythology, this is an idea.
I think it's time we take a break. Yeah.
That the comic books, especially the Marvel of today, are kind of the mythology of the mid-20th century, and that you are sort of the Homer.
Well, if you expect me to contradict that. I think, as a matter of fact, once when I was feeling very expansive, we had a letter to the editor in one of the pages, and somebody had written, "What right do you guys have changing the legends and so forth?" And I'm a little embarrassed at this answer I gave. I said something like, "Well, we're the legend makers of today, and why shouldn't we?" But actually, I guess anybody who writes any kind of fiction, if he's lucky enough to have people remember that fiction a few years hence, he's a legend maker of sorts. Arthur Conan Doyle was. I am Fleming. Anybody who writes anything that lasts a few years, after a while, you begin to believe in the characters. I mean, Sherlock Holmes is very real to many people. So I would like to hope that at least for a few years, people remember our little characters. And I'm very pleased that you said Homer. You may be a little flattering.
I was thinking specifically of things like your epic battles between these characters who I think resemble very much in the fact that just in the kinds of characters they are. You know, nothing specifically out and out mythological characters like Thor, but I'm thinking just well, my favorite is Paul. And thinking of people like this, I mean, they have these epic battles, and they're very much like battles among the gods.
Well, it's a funny thing. You see, there too we're kind of lucky, because this is my taste, and it's Jack Kirby's taste. He thinks very much the way I do. We both have a similar sense of drama. And we like things that are Olympian and Homeric. And we figure if two guys have to fight, they could just as well be the two strongest guys in the universe as a couple of stiffs somewhere. So, to us, we like extremes, and we like real drama, melodrama, I guess. And fortunately, there seem to be enough other people who like the same thing. So we're lucky in being able to do the kind of stories we want, and it's falling on some receptive viewers for eyes, I guess.
You stated that, your big success started about 5 years ago and really caught on. I mean, do you attribute that to anything? Was there any change
in
your part of it? Or?
Yeah. We had been turning out what I consider to be pretty average comic magazines for years. They were good enough for what they were, but we kind of thought of them as comic magazines. And I myself was doing a million different types of writing at the time, radio, TV, advertising, and the comics were a job, but I never could get too enthusiastic about them. And one day my wife, who's a lot wiser than I am, said to me, "Why don't you concentrate on what you're doing and make these comics a little better?" And I think I was watching television at the time, so I wasn't able to argue with her. Before I knew it, maybe it was boredom too, turning out the same stories all the time. I said, okay, I'm going to do one book and do it the way maybe I think a comic ought to be done. And we turned out the first Fantastic Four. And I didn't expect anything to come of it. And boy, we got it. And because we had comic magazines were so cliche written. All the heroes were the same, all the villains were the same, all the problems were the same. So we tried to make the EFF a little different. And one of the big differences, they fought themselves. Now this is very natural. And in fact, as I was writing it, I thought to myself, well, why hasn't this been done before? How else, if you're doing real people, how else would you write a story? People don't always do. And then I realized that's the whole answer. Let's write about real people. Let's write stories which would be, well, the whole idea would be, what would you do if you had superpowers? You're an ordinary, well, you may be offended if I call you an ordinary. And then suddenly you get superpowers. Well, it wouldn't change you that much. You might be able to climb walls. And I think this is the reason, you're the one who asked that, I think, this is the reason that the books caught on. I think everybody kind of felt, gee whiz, we haven't read this before. You see, now when the novelty wears off, we may have to start getting cliche written to keep our readers, because after a while, this realism kick may become dull, but until it does, it seems to be doing pretty well. Yes.
Now, you said something before about comics being cliche written. One of the impressions that you get in reading Marvel comics is that you guys don't really take yourselves all that seriously. You take these cliches and sort of lampoon them. To what extent is this really done, I mean, consciously, and to what extent is it just...
You know, it's really hard to answer, because when I write the stories, I'm getting a kick out of them, you know? And I think I'm really taking them seriously. But, well, like this business about Odin and Zeus and how many heavens are there, after a while you have to figure, oh, what the heck, it'll make a good story. I'm not going to worry about the fact that there are two heavens. You know, it's more interesting to have Zeus here and Odin here. So, a lot of things that I write seriously or shrug off, somehow when they're in print and you read them, they come off as deep satire. I don't think I'm really that clever. I think I was just chuckling to myself when I wrote it. But I really don't know how much is intentional and how much just happens accidentally.
What's the process? Is it first written and then...
We don't work the same as other outfits. To answer your question, normally, the way a newspaper script is done, or the way other comics are done, or the way we did it up till 5 years ago, the writer writes the script just as a playwright writes a play. Then the playwright gives it to a director who can't sit and reproduce the settings and everything. And then the director would be the equivalent of the artist. But we don't do it that way, and we have what I think is a much better system, and that we stumbled into because of necessity, and now I marvel that everybody doesn't do this. I had been writing all the stories myself, and I just didn't have time. If I was writing a story for Jack Kirby, Don Heck might be sitting on his hands waiting to do something. And our schedule is so tight, we can't afford to let Don be sitting around waiting. And yet I had to finish this story. So finally I said, look, Don, I can't give you a script. I've got another day's writing to do because Jack needs it. But the next story would be Iron Man goes here and he does that and he meets that guy. You go ahead and draw it any way you can. I'll put the copy in later. So Don went ahead and did it. And I've got these drawings that are like a crossword puzzle. I didn't know what was going on. But anyway, I put the copy in, and I found as I was doing it, it made it much more enjoyable. Because I wasn't looking at blank paper in a typewriter, but I was writing copy for people, for drawings that I was looking at with expressions and actions. And I got all carried away, you know? And my wife would come in and, what are you talking to yourself about? Are you writing the dialogue and saying it out loud? So that's the way we do it now. Now I give an artist a synopsis, and he draws the story himself, and I have no idea what I'm going to get. Sometimes it comes out so far removed from what I expect. Now a guy like Kirby, who is every bit as imaginative as I am, I wouldn't say this for public consumption, probably a lot more. We discuss a plot, and he throws in an idea, and I do, and a few days later I get the drawings back. And thank God, for instance, we have this new thing, the Silver Surfer. I'll have to tell Jack Jack about that because it was as much of a surprise to me as it was to you. We brought the script in and all we had discussed was Galactus. And I said, who's this naked nut running around? That's the Silver Surfer. Jack, you gotta be kidding. He says, no, Stan, he rides the air currents of space.